You're listening to a Corridor Business Journal podcast.
It's time for straight talk about diversity, frank questions, honest answers, and real insights. It's Diversity Straight Up, brought to you by Green State Credit Union, with your hosts Sadika Bhatka of Nikea Diversity Consulting and Anthony Arrington of Top Rank Professional and Executive Search Firm. Diversity Straight Up, brought to you by Green State Credit Union, is a Corridor Business Journal podcast. On today's episode, Ray Brown, CEO of ESCO Group.
I'm a firm believer that if you great beginnings first start with great endings. So I'm really excited to develop, what does that great ending for our DE&I charter look like? And then what's that end picture look like? And then how do we go back to the beginning and say, these are the strategies that we need to develop? But that accountability piece is huge.
We'll be right back.
Green State Credit Union is proud to sponsor Diversity Straight Up. Established in 1938, Green State is Iowa's largest financial cooperative, serving nearly 250,000 members of all walks of life. Green State's products include checking accounts, loans, investments, insurance, commercial services, mortgages, and credit cards. Profits are returned to members in the form of better rates on deposits and loans. We encourage you to learn more at greenstate.org. Green State is federally insured by the NCUA and is an equal housing opportunity lender.
Diversity Straight Up, brought to you by Green State Credit Union, is also sponsored by Alliant Energy.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the Corridor Business Journal's Diversity Straight Up. I'm your co-host, Sadika Bhatka.
And I'm Anthony Arrington, and we're in for a good show today. I want you to strap your seatbelt on. We're going to have a little fun with Ray Brown from ESCO Group. We'll get into his introduction a little later here. But first and foremost, Sarika, something's on my mind.
Something's on my mind.
I watched the space shuttle launch yesterday. I don't know. Did you get a chance to watch that?
Oh,
pretty cool.
yes, beautiful.
Yeah, exciting. I like space. I enjoy space. I was Star Trek, Star Wars. I enjoy it all. But there's this challenge in me that says we got this billionaire spending this money, and I'm looking at all these hungry people in the world, and I'm looking at all this hunger and this poverty, and I'm struggling with how that money could be spent. And this is America. This is a capitalist society, and we should be able to spend our money doing what we want. But I struggle with that a little bit, so I just wonder what you thought about that. It's one of those things where it's fun. I think it's great, but man, that money could be used in so many other ways, and so I tend to struggle with that a little bit.
Well, thank you for sharing your perspective. I think this is why I love what's on your mind. I never know what's on your mind or what comes out of my mind sometimes when we do these topics. This one I wasn't expecting at all. First of all, me, I don't like to group people together. So even billionaires as a group wouldn't be fair if we're walking the talk of trying to ensure that people are their individual person. So when you were talking about this incident, I was trying to look at, him as a man and his life's journey. And he didn't graduate from high school, seems like, unless if I read it wrong. And he's an entrepreneur. So if I think about from an entrepreneur and building a life and creativity, invention, innovation is part of that philosophy. And as the founder and owner of a, company that really goes into space, in the skies, it's not a far reach to, go from the skies to the space. And so for me, I think about from that business aspect, it makes sense for him in that regard. Now you're thinking about the other philanthropic arm, right?
And he gives, they give the philanthropy. They donate.
Yes, and he's part of that pledging. He's part of that giving pledge. It's part of that club. If you're in that elite club. And so I always think about it as an individual. I don't like to judge in terms of what they have, what's their purpose, what's their legacy, right? And so just reading up, at least for that individual, seems as if being part of that giving pledge, as well as philosophy in terms of what do you want to do with that legacy. And it seems like giving back socially and environmentally is part of their philosophy. The foundation that he has 0% overhead, which I think is beautiful coming from sitting on boards of nonprofits. We have to assess that all the time, right, Ray? We're on the board that there is some assessment. And so this one, because they take care of it with another arm, the foundation, 100% giving to the foundation, goes out.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I guess I
There's
take a
always
look
a
at.
money trail somewhere. There's always that.
But it's a great question that you do pose. And
it
so
is.
I always think about, also increase in, the B corporations, right? Thinking about, you're seeing more companies looking at their corporate social responsibility, and more you're seeing that as a driver in terms of we can't just rely on the nonprofits and the governments anymore to address the social needs that are glaring in our community. So this is where the businesses have to step up.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my head is going when I think about your question.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with Steve Schreiber that I can't be charitable unless I'm making profit.
Yeah.
Right? It's people, profit, planet.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think Sadaka did a great job, Anthony, and I think you got to peel back the onion a little bit, and you think about, sure, we see like the thrill seeker going there, billions, but then you also look at the innovation and what NASA has been able to do to create all these wonderful products, the things that potentially could feed many people. Yeah. But you have to kind of get past that, and that piece of it's coming, that private partnership of really continuing the NASA mission. But certainly there's that thrill seeker thing that I think we all see. But there is, as you go back to that layer, I think there's the next outing. They're going to have 2 seats that go to individuals.
Yeah, I think they're doing a sweepstakes or something like that.
Yeah. So really create a cause around that.
No, let me be clear. I wanted to make sure. And I started reading about him, the individual, because I started hearing these things. And again, I always say this, when you hear things in media, I don't care what kind of media it is. If you read about it, you need to go verify it somewhere else. And if you read it here or you watch it here, so I started reading up on some of the things that he's doing, and that's why I said it's one of those things that kind of bother me, but I'm thinking he's a giving person, so I just wanted to bring it up and say, what do you think? So
I think it's a great topic.
I think so too.
I think he's like 70, 75.
Yeah.
You talk about like the next generation, like to continue to go and give back and I heard the new 50 is like the new 30. So
hope so.
The new 75 must be like the new 50.
So
we got that to look forward to.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for bringing it up, because what's on your mind is exactly it, is what's going on, and being able to engage in dialogue. Yes. So thank you. What's on our guest's mind? Ray Brown is the CEO of the ESCO Group. He has worked with ESCO since 1992, and he began his career there. And since then, he is now the CEO. He was appointed in 2014. Wow, that's pretty impressive. I just have to stop and say 29 years with ESCO, and you started there, and this is where you're still at. But before then, he attended University of Northern Iowa, where he received his Bachelor of Arts in Accounting. While at UNI, Ray was active in the Iowa Society of CPAs and in tax assistance. In 1992, Ray also achieved his certification as an Iowa Certified Public Accountant. Ray, welcome to our show on DSU, as we're always keeping it real, but welcome.
Thank you, Sadaka. Yeah, a little shout out to my fellow Panthers out there. Panthers.
Well, why don't you share a little bit about yourself? And the second piggyback question is, what made you say yes to wanting to come on the show here?
Yeah, you bet, Sadaka. I think really it kind of goes back to my upbringing, and not to start too far down in the weeds, but
that's where we want to go.
Yeah,
under the hood and the weeds.
Under the hood.
We're here on the southeast side of Cedar Rapids, and I believe I'm probably about a mile from my home I grew up in. On the southeast side, attended Catholic middle school growing up. I went to Grant Wood Middle School for a couple years, and then back to All Saints for a couple years. Had a year at Regis, and then I eventually ended up for 3 years over at Cedar Rapids, Washington. So my upbringing has been really always around this diverse. So the southeast side of Cedar Rapids is one of the probably the most diverse areas in town. And when you look at Cedar Rapids, Washington, I really see that as you can have your really the haves, and then you have a lot of the have-nots, and that really grouping a population, we had to come together as students, and certainly that's a big part of what made me today is just my upbringing. Certainly youngest of 5 boys, seen a lot of mistakes, my older brothers over the years. And just really sound, family knew it. My dad was worked down at Wilson Foods, Cedar Rapids Meats, probably dating some of the folks that are out there.
Grandpa, grandma, we had all families.
Yeah, just a big time blue collar background. I had worked my way through school. Shout out to my fellow employee company out there, the Foliants and the Gazette. Actually had a paper route from like 3rd grade through my senior year of high school.
Wow.
And one of the things that, I kind of reflect on, I think, I'm passionate about really giving to our community, sitting on United Way board. We've been talking about DE&I here for the past 6 months, and this thing around the 19th Street, that's a big thing, and Cedar Rapids, and I know, Anthony, you know about this, is, if you go west on 19th Street, that's not that great of a part of town. Well, that's where my paper route was. Like, I had like 65 very diverse customers, and they were some of the best people you'd ever want to get to know. So that's kind of how I grew up, and a lot of different things through schools. Attended University of Northern Iowa, and was blessed to actually meet my current bride, wife Lori. I have 2 kids. Actually met in high school, so high school sweethearts. And so faith, family have always been super important to me, and just diverse background of kind of where I grew up. Graduating UNI in 92, the Engel family, ESCO group, started by the Engel, Wayne Engel, who's, really that's the second piece that's been hugely impactful on my life is company was started in 1964. Dan and Dave were 2nd generation owners. Their commitment to the community was always there. I know Wayne's huge Marion supporter. When they moved their office to Uptown Marion, there's a XXX theater in Uptown Marion. Wayne decided to buy that theater, and he turned it into a $1 family movie, back in, probably 35, 40 years ago now. And that's what Dave and Dan did. They ran a $1 movie theater that used to be a XXX. So, like, just changing the community and making an impact, making our community where we live, work, and thrive has always been a passion of ESCO, and I just try to continue that today.
One of the things you mentioned is you talked about, you're growing up in Cedar Rapids, and your lived experiences have kind of made you who the person you are growing up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. For our listeners, can you talk about a scenario, an incident in your life, be it personal or professional, as you grew up? Maybe there was an incident or an activity or something that happened in your life that was a trigger that made you think about how you reflect when it comes to equity and diversity and inclusion and engagement. Maybe there's, an incident, a personal, professional that happened. Can you talk through that?
Yeah, you bet, Anthony. I think, it really kind of goes back to the high school experience. I named some name, but Trace Brown, he was a really good friend of mine in high school. Trace, I know, and no relation. We'd always joke he was defensive nose guard. I was defensive tackle. Like, we're brothers from 2 different mothers. But we were out. We would do a lot of things. Go to Kenwood, play basketball, hang out with a lot of other diverse kids, and we sometimes would get stopped by police or adults, and it was amazing how Trace and other folks would get treated differently. And I think it was pretty much a recognition that, this doesn't seem right. This isn't right, and back then, we're probably young, and, we didn't talk about those things. It's just like, it was just kind of part of life. And I think that's probably the big game changer for me, Anthony's been, is like, now I'm in a leadership role at ESCO, we can enact change. And, there's a quote that I learned this last year, Martin Luther King, in the end, you will not remember your enemies. You'll remember your friends who were silent. And gosh, you know what? I bet you I was silent about you in high school and growing up, and, and just reflecting back and just saying, what, it's, we need to do something different, and especially, companies like ESCO, CEOs that are mid-sized, smaller companies, we have a really impactful voice that we can bring to this conversation. And it's just hard to understand where to get started. Yeah. And how do you make it safe? How do you create a safe conversation to get that going?
Yeah, I think it's important that you acknowledge that that the silence, right? I think many of us have felt that way, and I don't think it's I think it's okay to say that. And what are we going to do today, right? Or we've all made mistakes. We've all had those situations. So I think that's a great point.
And I think, and that's actually one of Anthony's favorite quote as
It is.
well. He shares that a lot in the sessions and training sessions with clients that we do jointly together. You had asked, what can you do as a leader, right?
Yeah.
Things like this, right?
Yep.
Being able to, again, say that as a leader, this is what I have in my control, and being able to have a dialogue with even us. It shows that you're wanting to create those safe environments in the workplace and in the community and at the family dinner table to be able to have these conversations. And I think that modeling the way as leaders is so critical. So speaking of modeling the way, you signed the CEO Action Pledge for Diversity and Inclusion, which is a national initiative. The last that I counted, we have 17 companies in Iowa whose CEOs have signed this pledge. For our listeners, would you mind sharing a little bit about the CEO Action Pledge for D&I?
Some of you out there may know, but ESCO Group, we're a 40% employee-owned company. So culture, engagement, that's what makes our company special. So when you look at the things that we've done over the years in terms of DE&I, the CEO Action is a community. So just like our employee ownership, there's two awesome organizations out there that really create a community where you can go to like-minded companies and just say, what's working, what's not. And that's kind of what CEO Action does for us. So when we got on this journey trying to figure out where to start, and the first thing that we knew is that we had to educate ourselves. So how are we going to educate ourselves? And so the CEO Action, it was started by PricewaterhouseCoopers from Tim Ryan, CEO. I think they're called PwC today. But it was 200 other like-minded CEOs. And really the commitment is to sign the pledge. It's really not that complicated. It means, number one, you're going to focus on a diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment. That's number one. You're actually going to put together a strategic plan around DE&I, and you're going to share it with your board of directors and your leadership team. And so the CEO Action, I think you had 17. There's actually approximately about 2,000 CEOs that have taken the pledge. But it's not just for CEOs. So I know one of the things that our leadership team has really struggled on, because if you look at the makeup of, ESCO Group, construction, engineering, 300 plus professionals come from a wide variety of backgrounds. And a lot of these folks that have come up through the trades, they're some of our key leaders today. So trying to create a conversations around what does it mean to be inclusive? What does diversity mean? I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all agree, like, we will hire the best talented people regardless of, race, color, and ethnicity. Like, we can agree on that. Okay, how do we get the conversation going to start creating a strategy around that? So CEO Action is also a community for your leaders, your HR professional to get tapped into. And there's other resources. They'll bring in professionals like yourself, Anthony, in helping you navigate what that looks like. So we're just on the budding end, or the first part of this journey with the CEO Action. And so part of our strategic plan for 2021 was to sign the pledge, which obviously we've done that. I'm one of 17 in Iowa.
According to the website that we have looked at.
We could do better than that.
Keep an eye out on that website.
We do.
And then our strategic plan is we're going to develop a DE&I equity committee. So they're in the process of working on a charter. So our focus for this year is really on education and being an inclusive work environment. So back in the first part of the year, as we kick off the new year, we'll really share with our employees, what does that strategic plan look like? So we shared the CEO action plan. We actually had a day of understanding. So we do a monthly town hall where we try to talk about really important issues, what's going on within ESCO, our partners, our community. And so one of those town halls back in, I believe it was February, we did just a session on CEO action and being inclusive. And so until our charter is built, and that's kind of the way we focus at ESCO, is very much around engagement. So, we have an E3 team that's developed on employee engagement. We develop a partnership. Leadership gets behind these teams. And you think about that pyramid where, typically the leaders at the top, we flip it. So, we get the leadership behind it, but then we have the employees drive the initiative. And that's how we're taking the DE&I initiative.
That's great. That's great.
So from the accountability perspective, how do you think that will be driven, Ray, as you start to think about your organization and you're just in the infancy stages of your equity, diversity, inclusion, and engagement? The accountability piece is so crucial, right, for the continued success. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the piece, I have to reflect back on a little bit on our, just our employee engagement journey. We launched our employee engagement, I've been with ESCO 30 years. When they first got started, they were just giving us advice on, hey, what should the health plan look like? Should we do a colonel's night, not do a colonel's night? So we actually do metrics. We do a quarterly assessment around, are you feeling valued? How can the company improve your skill set in terms of your role that you provide, the outcomes that you're driving? And so the HR director, myself, we sit down with the E3 team. We go through what those metrics are, and then our goal is to develop strategies around improving those. So I'm a firm believer that if great beginnings first start with great endings. So I'm really excited to develop, what does that great ending for our DE&I charter look like? And then what's that end picture look like? And then how do we go back to the beginning and say, these are the strategies that we need to develop? But that accountability piece is huge, Sadaka, but measurable. And I think this is the piece that maybe we missed a little bit in that first quarter when we sat down and had the discussion. And, I think a lot of employees were taking a step back and said, well, why are they talking about this? Do we have a problem? Do we not have a problem? Mm-hmm. And, I think our message got off a little bit, and maybe we could have done a better job of really developing that vision that, we need to educate ourselves on what it is, what we want it to look like. And that's where we're at today. And certainly, life, the busyness, ESCO, like other companies out there, we have got our workforce development challenges. Mm-hmm. And that's why this is so critical, though, and is if we're going to go after the best of the best talent, we have to create an inclusive environment. We have to look like the people that we want to bring into ESCO. And, ESCO's 64. There's probably a lot of stories out there like ESCO started in back of a entrepreneur's garage.
The old garage story.
Yeah. And now our leaders, they have to be able to talk with a plant floor person, a mid manager, or even a C-suite player. And if they don't have that skill set, we're not going to be successful.
One of the things, Ray, that we've experienced as consultants, and you hear about it in the media and all over, is this fear with white men, this syndrome, right? As a leader, that if we're talking about issues in an organization related to race or culture, that suddenly there's this sense of defensiveness, that some white leaders assume, oh, they must be talking about me. I'm not that way. And there's this wall that goes up, right? And for fear of being blamed and shamed. And Seneca and I have done a very good job of this as we meet with clients. It's important to create a safe space. But as a leader, I wonder how you feel about that. You're in that space. You're a white male leader of a company that when you're stepping out on a limb, having these conversations in an environment where that's not normal, maybe there's arrows being thrown at you by way of insults. Why are we doing this? How do you deal with that as a human being? How does Ray deal with that?
Thick skin, Anthony. No, you gotta be vulnerable. I think if you really want to get better as an organization and as a person, the first thing you have to admit is, hey, I can get better. That's one of our core principles, core values is get better to be better at ESCO. And it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong or right. It's just like, hey, we have to be continual learners, and that also goes with us as human beings. Going through, high school, Washington, if we knew what if we know now what we knew back then, geez, think about the different things that would happen.
Great point.
And so you got to be vulnerable. You have to assume positive intent. We talk about that a lot at ESCO. Assume positive intent.
We talk about that. That's why you're smiling.
That's what I do. I said assume the positive intent
Yes.
versus the impact. Is it coming from a malicious place, or is it coming from curiosity?
Right.
And so I appreciate you sharing that.
And admit that you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, I got that one wrong. And I think, at the same time, sometimes, you have to get up to bat and swing the ball. If you don't get out of the out of the batter's box, how are you going to win? And we play to win at ESCO. And so sometimes, you're not going to have everything figured out.
Right.
And I think that's the other really piece that we talk about a lot is don't make perfect the enemy of good. If we're committed to get better, to be better, and we've got a pretty solid, plan, maybe it's 75, 80% there, let's go.
Yeah.
And we're going to be okay to pivot when we need to pivot. Sometimes
Great perspective.
around these important topics, it's we have a tough time. We're having a tough time getting on the batter's box sometimes because you have to bring back your team. And I think this is a piece where maybe I, could have done something different, is really have more alignment within our leadership team. And do you have to have all that alignment before you get an important initiative like this? And I'm taking the approach that I kind of do anything. I don't think so. I think it's a journey that all of us, and we have an 8-person leadership team, including myself, and we have a lot of different perspectives, and we'll go down some rabbit holes on some topics.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I think in the end, it's the diversity of those 8 different perspectives and trying to make a good decision and still stay committed to moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the executive alignment is a key aspect of it, because I've always said part of this journey requires in your own workplace to have individuals that have an interest around DEI, as well as those that have power and influence. Sometimes that individual may have all 3, highly unlikely at times.
Yeah.
But that's why it's important to have that executive alignment with leaders that are on board, so that they can understand that if you want to get better, that also means that you can't go in with DEI thinking something is broken. Now, if you're hit with a lawsuit, now that's a different conversation. Then there is something that needs to be fixed, but it's reactive.
Yep.
For other companies, the majority of the companies, it's going to be a proactive journey, but you have to start now. And then really have that cultural assessment around D&I conducted to know where you're at. Some of them are going to be pleasantly surprised that guess what? You're not in the denial phase or the avoidance phase. You're actually a little further along in the journey than you thought. And now you're just being very strategic and intentional about where you are, putting your time, energy, resources, so you have a greater ROI on it.
Yeah.
That means what kind of training you want, what kind of leadership development. And so I appreciate your thoughts and perspectives, because a lot of times, again, with DEI, people think there's something broken, that's why we're going this journey. And I hate that kind of mindset, just because, DEI is an opportunity.
Yeah.
If you really can help get that alignment and go on this journey, that's
I always tell
going
them,
to
if you
create
wanna
some
feel like-
magical outcomes there.
You want to feel like something's broken. Well, it's broken here. It's broken everywhere else. Then it's not. You're no worse off than most other organizations, or better off. It's, are we going to grow?
Yep.
And you think you said something earlier. Some of us aren't even in the batter's box, and that's okay, right? But if everybody's getting there, eventually you're going to be on first base. Will that next person get to the batter's box? I hope so, right? If everybody's willing to move, the challenge becomes when people don't want to move and people don't want to grow, and that becomes part of that challenge. So.
How do you feel? I know at times we hear leaders say, we in our backyard have such a very homogenous labor pool. there is not much we can do about this. But from your perspective, how do you think you can influence partners that you may tap into, whether it be labor union or any other groups for contract work, etc.? How do you think you can influence that, right?
Yeah, I think, there's, it's different for different organizations. So certainly you look at ESCO Group, half of our professionals are bargaining professionals, half of them are non-bargaining. And so there's a lot of things as, you look at the bargaining side, we're involved with the apprenticeship programs. We're involved in recruiting, training. We partner with the union on really developing that employee experience for that union individual. And I know in the Cedar Rapids area, like right now it's kind of silly, but we have a JTC hall that will only take like 100 people because that's the size of it. So that's the only the number that we're taking, when the reality is we could probably be taking 120, 130, so we're in great conversations with that. But if you go outside of this area, there's a lot more being done. So you look at your organizations that you're involved with, certainly on the construction side, there's diversity. The NECA national, for us, that's the Association on the Electrical side. They're really developing some strategies where companies like ESCO can tap into. But just that workforce, certainly on the non-bargaining side, we recruit from all over the United States. We have offices in 7 different locations, so when we're looking for, a project manager, especially going through this last year with remote workforce, we don't have to have a person being in Cedar Rapids, or St. Louis or Indianapolis or, Louisville, Colorado, or Des Moines, Omaha. We can really try to recruit globally, and we've been doing that for a while. And so you have to, take a different approach. And I think that's maybe an eye-opening thing for a lot of businesses out there that maybe even haven't gone down the DE&I route, is when you think about influencing, your labor pool is a lot bigger than what just Cedar Rapids offers. Certainly this community is very passionate to myself and ESCO, but certainly, we as leaders have a bigger expanse. Certainly there's industries that don't, manufacturing, or, you really need that labor to drive some of that. But for us, it's more of a global recruiting effort from that standpoint.
Is that helping that the desire, the decision to kind of increase your remote opportunities at ESCO? Not that you have metrics today, but do you notice that's helping anecdotally? Have you
I think it is. I think the thing that we recognize, Anthony, is we had a recruiter that would go to the job fairs, Iowa, Iowa State, Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went out to Colorado, Boulder, and you just have a white male, in recruiting, and we're trying to promote this inclusive environment. So, how do you get the diversity people to come up and say hello? I mean, I think at some point, the recruiter is like pulling people out of the hallway, like bring them over to the ESCO booth. And, so the thing, one of the things that we did, we have a really great internship program. And talking to the younger folks, we just had this last year a new group formed, Women in Technology. So, as leaders, I think this is probably most. We don't have all the answers, but let's ask really good questions. So you go to some of our females that just came in. It's like, why did you choose ESCO? Like, what should we be doing differently? Like first thing, maybe you should get a couple female out there at your job fairs. And, so it's like you create this warm and inviting experience, and those things are kind of like no-brainers when you think about them, but it's just like small incremental things like that.
Being intentional.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to another segment of our show is called What's on Our Listeners' Mind? What's on our listeners' minds? So I think, Anthony, you've got our listener question for Ray today.
This is Jerry from Indiana. So, and again, it's not directed at Ray or anybody. It's just a question we pull out of the hat. So he says, I've been reading and hearing about so many stories around critical race theory and how to teach racism, or how to teach about race. As a leader, how do you feel about policies and education and on the history and the facts of race in America in terms of being educated on that? That's from Jerry from Indiana.
I think Jerry from Indiana, I think is spot on. I think it goes back with get better, be better. And I think that, if we think that we haven't grown up and haven't created some unconscious bias, I think we're kind of foolish to think that. And I think that's what it's really about is, how do we can educate ourselves? How can we understand, how do we get from, point A to point D?
Right.
And then as we've traveled from A to D, what have been our biases or unconsciouses in that? So how do we educate ourselves?
Yeah.
To me, it goes to the heart of emotional intelligence. We've been talking with leaders for years and years. Like, we're trying to connect with other people in our organizations and communicate the way they want to be communicated with. As we've stepped out into our communities, to me, that's not that far of a putt. When you think about understanding, different people's perspectives.
Right.
It's like, Anthony, we went to high school. There's no way that you and I had the same high school experience because we were in two different homes.
Right.
Then you start layering on the other things with, you're black, I'm white. Certainly,
Right.
Maybe we grew up on the southeast side, but we see things different. We feel things differently.
Right.
The only way we're going to solve problems is try to understand what it is. Let's educate ourselves.
Yeah.
And then how do we take a step back and say, these are the things that we can move forward together on.
I think Eric and I were talking about that earlier. How do we deal in a space of facts? I think we can all agree to disagree on where we're going and how we get there, but can we agree and to be educated and want to learn, right, and to want to grow? And to your point, right, all three of us sitting at this table have grown up differently. It doesn't matter how long we've lived in Cedar Rapids together. We all have a different experience. And
We need to be mindful of what happened in the past so we can assess what's going on now and be able to look at solutions moving forward.
One of the things to talk about, pausing and, one of the things that, we're doing at ESCO, we're very proud. 2019 became a Iowa Workforce Development Great Place to Work certified. And so part of that process is you have to survey your employees, really broad, are you valued, leadership, engagement, the whole host of metrics that you look at. Equity was I think there was like 2 questions on equity. But out of that, you get your metrics. And, we became a certified great place. I think we had close to 92% people do that. But a big push out of that is, then we come back and look at our metrics and we do focus groups. So we have 3 business units. We sat down with employees developing very, action plans. I think they put it in 2 categories, the just do it's, and then some more heavy lifting action plans.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've worked through that. And, this last year, certain DE&I inclusion, came on our radar screen. And so from my perspective, I'd love to ask you guys is we're going down this, certified workplace. It's really about driving, being an elite employee experience, culture, and engagement. It didn't have a big DE&I piece. How do we not lose our people with bringing in that maybe that assessment around DE&I, or, are we at the point where we just have to wait for, great places to work to kind of develop a broader piece around, some of that focus groups around some of that really important conversations around DE&I?
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to wait. If I understand what you're asking is how we've just got out of this massive assessment and got this great recognition, and how do we go in now to our organization and say we need to do this DEI assessment? We want to look at it again without people saying, or we're going to lose it. Why are we doing that? And I think it really starts with understanding why, and the opportunity, for example, a town hall. You said you have a monthly town hall. It's an opportunity to explain before you take that step. Here's why. And then the other part of it is depending on how you're assessing an organization, are you taking a 30-minute assessment that's going to drive your staff bananas? Or is it something short and sweet that you can really capture the essence of the information around the diversity, equity, inclusion cultural assessment that you want? And so there's a lot of combinations, but if I were in your shoes, I don't know that I would wait. I think there's ways that you can probably start. I don't know what your thoughts are,
Great question.
Yeah.
And I think we get this asked a lot. I think for any DEI strategies, you mentioned you were going on a strategic plan. It's challenging to do one without having a DEI assessment done, because then that informs where the areas, where are the gaps, where are the opportunities to enhance. And if you feel that that DEI component it was not in it, then this is a great opportunity to be able to tell your team that it's great that we are on this journey with this. We feel that the DEI is extremely important, and it was not as visible in that. So we would like to ensure that it is addressed. We want you to be seen, felt, and valued. And DEI is not just in a silo by itself. Yeah. And you want to integrate it as part of your cultural transformation. Yeah. Hence, pausing, assessing, course correcting is part of this journey. And just message it in that way. And that you're valuing it and you want them to be part of it and taking the time. So I think that before you go too far ahead, ensure that you know that this is valuable. Make it valuable, make it a priority. You're walking the talk that you are really wanting to do DEI.
Great. So for our listeners, great conversation. And for our listeners, if we'd love to keep your questions coming in, info@diversitystraightup.com.
All right. Now let's go to, did any of you play ball in high school?
We did. We played a little ball.
Really?
Okay. I know how to do it. It's fun stuff.
All right. Well, I'm going to have you start this segment then.
All right. So this segment is called our Diversity Thumb Ball, Ray. This is fun. So it's a great icebreaker. It's got a bunch of questions and comments around diversity. And the way that we play it is I slam Sarah in the face and we just go home. I'm just kidding. Actually,
he hasn't done it yet. Let's see if you can.
It's about getting better.
It's about getting better.
You'll get Joe's equipment before you get my face, and that's called liability.
So we'll throw this ball in the air.
Bloodied up a little bit. It'll be okay.
So for our listeners, it's like a little soccer ball, and it's got sayings all over the ball. So we'll throw the ball in the air, and wherever your thumb lands, left or right, ask the question and answer it honestly. Pretty simple. All right?
All right.
So I will start, and I will throw it to you first. Then.
All right.
I'll throw it to Sarah first. We'll leave you last.
What gender roles did you learn about when growing up? Oh, how much time do we have here? In my household, because I don't want to generalize, it's a very patriarchal culture I grew up in. Let's just say my first year in college, my dad said, there is this guy that we want you to meet for marriage. I'm a first-generation college student, so thank you, Dad, for helping with that. But yet the first year of college, he said, marriage. I said, no, education. He said, you can get educated after marriage. I said, no, Dad. This is just one example of quite a few that people get to know over time. But that was one gender role that I learned. The value of marriage and the value of education, at least for me, what did that look like? Yeah. And that was kind of lopsided.
That's tough.
I did hold off on marriage, and I did pursue my education, everyone. So
do your thing. Good for you.
Yes.
All right. Where are you going?
We'll go closer here.
All right. Describe a time when you witnessed a bias or discrimination.
You can't use the one you used earlier.
No, I won't. Actually,
which is a good one.
I got a good story. So I think I mentioned we do town halls at ESCO. So, it was probably 4, 5, 6 years ago. We were doing an in-person one, and we got done at the end. And there was a group of leaders that were talking, kind of in our cafeteria area, and we had one of our senior leaders kind of leading the discussion. I was kind of listening in with 2 other people, and they're talking about, some important things. And I just, recognized that there's like 3 or 4 ladies, just cleaning up around us and like actually pushing them out of the way. I'm like, okay, we're going to pause this conversation and we're going to help clean up. And the look I got from my senior leader, it looked like he's going to throw, a pitchfork through me. I'm like, really? And that was kind of like a aha moment. I grew up being a servant leader, and respect is one of our core values at ESCO. And sitting around and there's too many little things like that happen in organizations, that probably go unaddressed.
Yeah.
And I think we as leaders need to address those. You come to meetings and, the female gets chosen to take the notes, is it because they got the best handwriting? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's some microaggression
it's a
happening in that one right there.
Yeah. So, that's something, just from ESCO that, and I think it's, the thing that we need to do more of being intentional on is pausing and addressing those things when they pop up in a professional way.
Yeah. Good one. Yeah. We could go all day about microaggressions.
Oh yeah, those micro messages can create
All right.
big impact.
Anthony,
All right. Do I still catch like high school?
I don't know if you catch, but I don't know if you throw it.
Recount a time when you felt like an outsider. Oh my goodness. Oh, where do I start? When I left Johnson Elementary, so I went to kindergarten through 4th grade. I was at a school called Johnson Elementary in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I got asked to go to a school called Squaw Creek for 5th and 6th grade. I remember being pulled into an office and being asked did I want to change schools. And I was told it was Expo. It was expanding pupil opportunities, but apparently it was for kids that were smart. What I learned later as an adult is that was part of it, but the other part is that Cedar Rapids was trying to desegregate some of the other schools in the communities. They were trying to diversify the schools. So I got bussed out to Squaw Creek. My mom basically said, you're going. So I left Johnson Elementary, and in 5th grade, I left all my friends and started getting bussed out to Squaw Creek Elementary. And I remember being in a class full of 5th and 6th graders and being the only black person in the class. Now, I'm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and that was pretty typical, but at Johnson Elementary, it was quite a bit more diverse than it was at Squaw Creek. And so I remember I was a little nervous the first few days just going to school there, just because I had never really been the only one in the room at that age. And I didn't really know why I was there and why can't I be back at Johnson with all my friends. And so that was probably one of my first experiences feeling like an outsider. So fun stuff.
That's tough.
Oh, well, I hope you enjoyed this segment, Ray. And we're just wrapping up our show. Before we do, I want to ask you, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you would like to share with our listeners, as well as any advice you may have them to help enhance their equity, diversity, inclusion, and engagement journey?
Yeah, just a couple of things, Sadek. I think first and foremost, thank you again to yourself and Anthony for I think a lot of times when you sit down and you have conversations like this as leaders, I learn more about myself doing this, and I'm hopeful that same thing will happen here. So big thank you. I think just as leaders, you got to start somewhere. I think it's an important piece just to say, hey, pause. You're running an organization, and whether you like it or not, DE&I and inclusion and engagement, those are all things as leaders that we're trying to drive. And so why not have a really great strategy around those things and you're really taking your organization to the next level. And if you're not addressing those things because you think they're not safe, that's okay. There's professionals out there, there's communities, there's networks to really get started. And then, lastly, really blessed to be myself, Kelly, Mark Bank will be running the 2021 United Way cabinet campaign this year, and really proud of the things that the United Way is doing around really the whole DE&I discussion. There's a community assessment, I think, that just closed up yesterday. So really excited to circle back with the United Way leadership team and just see what that assessment brought out. And as community leaders, how can we kind of peel back that onion and dig a little bit deeper in our community? And, how can we connect what we're doing at ESCO, not just from our cultural engagement side, but also with our time, talent, and treasure. Because at the end of the day, this is a beautiful community. We all live, Cedar Rapids area, the surrounding cities. We all have a super vested interest in not just generation, but, many, many generations to come.
Well, thank you, Ray. Yeah. Great advice for anyone, anywhere around the world to really help drive your equity, diversity, inclusion, and engagement as a leader, and the compound effect it has in the communities that you serve. So thank you so much, Ray, for being here. We really enjoyed you and your perspectives, and for opening up and being vulnerable. I think someone once said to me that, Sarika, it's hard for leaders to be vulnerable. And I said, let's talk about it. I go, is vulnerable equate into weakness? Or is vulnerable equate into authenticity?
Yeah.
Let's do a perspective shift and look at vulnerability equals authenticity.
Yep. Looking at you said we were just small talking offline, looking at the glass half empty or half full, right? Which one are you going to look at?
Half full, baby.
Half full. So thank you. It's been fun. I want to thanks to our sponsors, our major sponsor, Green State Credit Union, along with Alliant Energy and the City of Cedar Rapids and Collins Aerospace. We want to thank you for your sponsorship and thank you for your time.
And
Absolutely.
thank you to our listeners.
To our
Without
listeners.
you, we would not be able to have this show. So continue to follow us, like us, share your thoughts, perspectives. And as we always say on Diversity Straight Up,
Keeping it real.
Rock on.
thank you to our listeners, as we wouldn't be here without your support. Help us grow our subscriber base by sharing our show with others.
Love this new episode of Diversity Straight Up, brought to you by Green State Credit Union? Then head over to the most popular podcast audio platforms to describe, rate, and review us. And check out our other episodes while you're there.
Catch us on our next episode, which drops monthly.
We'd love to hear from you. Hit us up and send your questions, comments, and suggestions to info@diversitystraightup.com.
Remember, wherever you live, work, and play, our backyards are increasingly global. It's not enough to simply be a leader. Be a global leader by leveraging diversity with equity, inclusion, and engagement. And share your journey. This may empower others to be bold change agents. Be courageous, be authentic, be vulnerable.
Diversity Straight Up, brought to you by Green State Credit Union.
Keeping it real.
You've been listening to Diversity Straight Up, brought to you by Green State Credit Union. Additional support provided by Alliant Energy, Collins Aerospace, and the City of Cedar Rapids. For more from the Corridor Business Journal, please visit corridorbusiness.com. This episode was produced by Joe Coffey of Coffee Grande Studios.